Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we winter sow columbine seeds. So let's go. I say this in the beginning of all my winter sowing videos. The reason is I have a lot of people that are visiting my videos for the very first time. So if you are new to the whole winter sowing process, stick around and watch the full video. However, if you're very familiar with the winter sowing process, you've had a lot of success with it, go ahead and skip to the timestamp shown at the bottom of the screen to find out more about columbine plants and how to sow the seeds. Winter sowing is the process of sowing seeds outdoors during the winter months. You can simply scatter the seeds out on the ground, or you can sow the seeds in some sort of a container or pot. When it comes to what kind of container or pot to use, there are so many different choices out there. The big thing is you want to make sure it's translucent or clear. I like to use milk jugs, but I know other people have used juice jugs, rotisserie chicken containers, totes. The possibilities are endless. The big thing is, no matter what container you choose, you want to make sure that it can hold at least 4 inches of soil in it. Your containers should have holes in the top to allow water or moisture to come in. The containers should also have holes in the bottom to allow for proper drainage of water. I like to use potting mix. You can use whatever works for you. The key is to make sure that it's well draining and also that it retains some moisture. You don't want to use a seed starting mix because it's too light, too fluffy, and it will dry out way too quickly. You also don't want to use garden soil because it's very heavy and it's too compacted, which makes it difficult for roots to grow in. There are a ton of benefits when it comes to winter sowing. It's very easy to do, it's cheap. It doesn't require any additional equipment. You don't need any grow lights, you don't need any room inside your house. Another benefit to the winter sowing process is that the seeds will get a natural cold stratification period. That's very important for certain seeds such as perennial seeds. And in the end, your seedlings will be stronger, they'll be healthier, and they'll already be hardened off. You don't need to do the whole hardening off process like you would have to do if you started your plants indoors. Now, there is a certain timeline that you want to follow when it comes to winter sowing. If you start your seeds too early, there is a chance that those seeds will germinate prematurely, and if you get a cold snap, some of those plants that germinate quickly can die. However, if you start your seeds too late, what will happen is certain seeds, like the ones I talked about earlier that need a certain period of cold stratification time, they might not get that full period of cold stratification that those seeds need. So timing is everything. Now, of course, when it comes to the timing, it's going to vary from location to location. A general guideline is you do your winter sowing sometime starting in the month of December, but you want to be done with it sometime about 2 to 3 weeks before your average last frost date. But I want to give you a more specific timeline that I'm going to be following and that you can follow as well. So about 5 to 6 months before your average last frost date, you want to be sowing seeds that are requiring a cold stratification period. And those are usually perennials that are hardy in your area where you live. About 3 to 4 months before your average last frost date, that's a great time to be starting cold hardy plants. Plants that can tolerate cold, but also plants that reseed very easily in your area. Approximately 1 to 2 months before your average last frost date is a good time to start plants that are not cold hardy, plants that do better in warmer temperatures. Now, keep in mind though that when those seeds germinate, if you are going to have a cold snap, if you're going to have some cold nights, cold days, you want to protect those seedlings. You may need to cover them during that time. You may need to bring in your containers just for a few nights during those cold snaps. I want to add a few more tips regarding the winter sowing process. If you don't have enough containers and you need more, reach out to a local coffee shop. I've done that with Starbucks. I've given them a heads up and they've saved a bunch of empty milk jugs for me. Also, I don't pre-moisten all my potting mix. I just spray the top layer of it. The reason is as soon as I put the milk jugs outside, they're going to get plenty of freezing cold temperature. They're going to freeze. And so there's no use in pre-moistening all the potting mix. And also we get a lot of snow where I live, and if it's warm enough, we get rain. So we do get a lot of moisture here. If you live in an area where you don't get a lot of moisture or where your milk jugs are not going to fully freeze, then it's worthwhile to go ahead and pre-moisten all your potting mix. And then finally, you want to make sure that whatever container you're using will not blow around in the wind. Where I live, it's not very windy. All I do is corral all my containers close to each other. They're huddled next to each other and they're secure. They don't blow away in the wind. But where you live, that might not be the case. So you may need to corral all your containers and put some sort of barrier around them to protect them from a very windy situation. So I'll start with a quick plant profile and then we'll go ahead and winter sow our columbine seeds. Columbine flowers have a dangling bell-like shape and they have spurs on the back. They are very pretty and they also come in lots of different colors. You'll find them in white, pink, purple, red, multicolor. There's quite a bit of selection out there when it comes to columbine flowers. I found some really interesting fun facts I wanted to share with you. The name columbine comes from the Latin word dove, and that's because of the introverted flowers, which look like 5 doves in flight. And guess what the state flower is for Colorado? You guessed it, columbine. I have winter sown columbine from seed for many years. It's actually a very easy plant to grow from seed. And like a lot of other perennials, when you grow columbine from seed, it may not bloom until the second year. Last year, I had such a wonderful display of columbine plants in my backyard plant nursery, and those plants sold like hotcakes. Now, those plants were winter sown 2 years ago, and then last year was when they bloomed. They were so pretty, so that's why I want to winter sow more seeds this year. Some plants, when they drop their seeds, for whatever reason, they don't germinate easily. Well, that's not the case with columbine. Once you have a columbine plant in place in your garden, if you just take the seeds and scatter them at the base of that plant, you'll end up with a ton more columbine plants in future years because the plant does self-sow very readily. Columbine is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9. And there is one specific variety that's actually native. It's called the Eastern Red Columbine or Wild Red Columbine. It has a red and yellow flower and it's native to certain parts of the United States and Canada. And I'll provide a list of all the areas where that plant is native in case you're interested. Now, I don't have the native columbine in my yard, but I am planning to order the seeds because I do want to grow it as part of my yard as well as to offer in my plant nursery. Columbine blooms late spring to early summer. And it does really well in a shady location, especially where your summers are hot. Where I live in New Hampshire, we have cooler summers generally, so I can get away with planting columbine in a more sunnier location. They grow 6 to 12 inches in height and they make an excellent cut flower. It is pollinator friendly, meaning hummingbirds, moths, butterflies, and even bees are very attracted to this plant. But like a lot of plants, you don't want to be eating the plant or the seeds, any part of the plant, because if you ingest any parts of the plant, it can be toxic to you or to your pets. And yes, even though columbine is deer and rabbit resistant, animals can browse on the plants if they are hungry and there's not enough food for them to forage on elsewhere. I do want to point out some possible pests or problems you might run into with the columbine plant. Leaf miners will leave their mark on the columbine's leaves. If you see their doodles, pick through the leaves and crush the larvae. And if you find aphids or sawflies on your plant, you can treat them with either neem oil or insecticidal soap. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what to do with the seeds. The seeds need light to germinate. In other words, you don't want to cover the seeds. You want to take the seeds and you want to press them into the soil. And if you do cover them, you just barely want to cover them, about 1/8 of an inch, with either vermiculite, seed starting mix, or potting mix. The seeds need a cold stratification period. And so when I place my milk jug outside, the seeds will automatically get that period of cold. However, if you are going to sow the seeds indoors, then you want to give the seeds that cold stratification period by placing the seeds in your refrigerator for a period of time. And also, if you are planning to grow columbine seeds indoors under grow lights, then you want to start your seeds about 6 to 8 weeks before your average last frost date. And if you're not sure what your average last frost date is, you can look it up on the website provided below by entering your zip code. Keep in mind that your average last frost date might not be exact just based on your zip code. So look carefully at the map and find your location, and that's a more accurate way to find out what your average last frost date is. The seeds will germinate once the soil temperature is somewhere between 65 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So when their seeds are outside, they will germinate when the conditions are met. However, if you are planning to sow the seeds indoors, then you want to make sure that you're growing them with those right conditions. If you're growing the seeds in a very cold space, you may need to supplement and put a heat mat just to raise the temperature to somewhere between 65 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, I'm going to show you what seeds I have for Columbine, and then we're going to go ahead and sow some seeds. You can definitely use store-bought seeds, but you can see here that I am going to be using seeds that I collected. And even though we're only going to be winter sowing one packet of these seeds, my plan for this winter is to winter sow a little bit of the seeds from each of the packets. This is a white Columbine, and I want to show you that it's the seeds mixed with some of the non-seed material, also known as the chaff. That's okay to store your seeds sometimes like that. Sometimes life gets busy and we just don't have time to separate the seeds from the non-seed material. And when I sow these, I'll be sowing them with both the seed and non-seed material. I got these seeds from my friend Linda. She wasn't sure what the year was when she collected the seeds, and she's also not sure about what color the flower is. So we will call it a mystery Columbine. And these are seeds that I collected. I wrote not typical purple color. So I am probably going to be sowing these mixed with another color of Columbine, and that's okay. And well, this has two types of seeds in it, old-fashioned bleeding heart and a purple Columbine. And I want to show you, if you look closely, you can actually see which ones are the Columbine seeds. They're the small oval-shaped seeds. And those really round, larger seeds, those are the old-fashioned bleeding heart seeds. I've never grown bleeding hearts from seed, so I'll be doing that in a different video. And then here are some more purple Columbine seeds that were collected. And you'll notice that the date on a lot of these seeds is a few years old. That is totally okay. Seeds can last a long time. And I've had these seeds in a cool, dark, dry location. So I feel very confident that I'll have great germination for these seeds. The container I'll be using is a milk jug. I've had a lot of luck with milk jugs, and my family does drink a lot of milk. However, you can use whatever container works best for you. Just make sure your container can hold at least 4 inches of potting mix. And with the ruler, you can see where the 4-inch mark is. So I'll be cutting just below the handle, which also will be used as a hinge for my mini greenhouse here. Some people like to draw and use a marker just to make the line across the container. I don't do that. I just kind of eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can use whatever you want to make the cuts in your container. I like to use these cutting shears or tin snips. They really work well for me. And notice again, I'm not cutting all the way around. I want to make sure I leave some space here so that I have a hinge to be able to open and close my mini greenhouse. Regardless of whatever container you use, you want to make sure that you have some sort of open area in the top to allow for rain, water, or snow to come in. So I've gone ahead and I've thrown away the cap for my milk jug. I also like to add additional holes in the top, but that's optional. You don't have to do that. I've just been doing that for the last few years. It allows for extra moisture to come in. I'm also going to go ahead and add holes in the bottom of my container. For my milk jug, I only add them on the outside here. And I make sure I add more than less holes because I want the container to be able to drain the water out. But also, if I wanted to, I could go ahead and bottom water my container. Now, if you had a much larger container, you definitely want to add more holes even towards the middle here. But I've never done that. I've only added them on the outside, and I've never had an issue with water. Remember, you don't want to use seed starting mix because it dries out too fast. You definitely want to use something that is well draining but also can retain moisture. So potting mix is a good option. You can use whatever brand of potting mix you like. I like to make my own potting mix, and what I'll do is put a link to that video down in the description below in case you're interested. I want to go ahead and press down very lightly on the potting mix, and the reason I'm doing that is I'm trying to remove any possible air pockets that might be in here. We're definitely not going to sow all of these seeds. There are way too many in here. I'm just going to take a pinch. And it's really up to you how many seeds you want to sow in your container. Some people only want to sow 4, 6, or 8 and space them out because that's as many plants as they want. Or they don't want to go through the hassle of having so many plants that they have to deal with because the plants are all competing for space. My plan is I will be sowing a lot of seeds. but then I will be potting up my plants as soon as they have 2 sets of true leaves on them. So it really is a personal choice on how many seeds you want to put in your container. And I'm sprinkling them the best that I can, knowing that there will be overlap, and I'm okay with that. Because I have a backyard plant nursery, it's important for me to grow a lot of plants from seed. It saves a lot of money that way, but also I'm a home gardener, and I also like to save money by growing plants from seed. And I'm patient. I know that these plants won't bloom for at least 2 years, but that's okay. That's one of the reasons why I winter sow all these kinds of plants every year, is just to keep adding to my stock of plants. Next, you want to press down on your seeds. The reason is you want to make sure that the seeds have good contact with the soil. I like to add a label on the inside of my container, just in case the label on the outside is unreadable. I'm going to go ahead and water the seeds in. So again, you might have to pre-moisten all your potting mix. I'm just going to do the top layer, and I'm spraying very gently. And the reason is I don't want to dislodge or move my seeds around. I want them to stay in place. I'm using duct tape to close my container. However, I know some people will punch holes in the top of their container as well as holes in the bottom, and they'll use something like pipe cleaners or a twisty tie to be able to close the container. You'll notice that I'm just using small pieces of duct tape. It's really up to you. If you want to use duct tape that goes all the way around, you can do that. I did that for years, and I found that it was a waste of duct tape for me. And these are perennials that I'm planting right now. So that's my reason for not putting duct tape all the way around. These perennials will only germinate after they've gotten a cold stratification period. Here where I live, it is freezing cold outside. These plants will not be germinating for a number of months. But if you live somewhere where you are worried that your plants are going to germinate too quickly, then by all means, you can go ahead and duct tape all the way around. Now, later in the season, when I'm planting tender annuals, let's say tomato plants or something like that, then I may want to seal it all the way around so that it really protects the plants that are on the inside. It does not matter right now. These perennials are not going to germinate where I live, and they are hardy here where I live. So I've gone ahead and I've added 2 pieces of duct tape to my container. And I've also pressed down on the duct tape because I want to make sure that it's nice and sticky on the container. I'm going ahead and adding the plant name on here. Now, I don't want to write it right on the container itself. I used to do that, but what I found is I like to reuse my container for a few years, so I'd much rather just write it on the duct tape. Some people would prefer to use a number system, and I think I like that idea. So instead of writing the name of the plant on here, what I could do is I could just write a number, like number 1. And then I have a list or a spreadsheet, and on there, number 1 would be Columbine. Number 2 might be a different plant. So you can do whatever system works best for you. The milk jug is going to get placed in a full sun location. I don't want this under any sort of structure like eaves or anything like that. I want this to be in an open area so that moisture, like rain or snow, can come into the hole here. If you're worried about your plants germinating too quickly or getting too hot inside the greenhouse, you can definitely move your containers into a shady location. I typically move all my containers into a shady location during the late spring months when it starts to get hot out. But I like to start off in a full sun location, especially with my perennials, because I want these seeds to germinate as quickly as when they're ready to germinate. And don't forget, if you don't want your containers blowing around, definitely protect them. I'm going to put all my containers next to each other so they're all corralled together. I really hope you enjoyed that video. I'm planning to show you later in the season what the seedlings look like when they emerge, my process for pricking them out, potting them up, fertilizing them, and then eventually planting them out either into my plant nursery or out in my landscape. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to watch those updates. And also be on the lookout for more winter sowing videos because I have a lot more winter sowing that I need to do. I want to hear from you. Have you grown columbine from seed? And if so, how did you do it? Did you scatter the seeds outside? Did you winter sow the seeds? Or did you start the seeds indoors under grow lights? What variety did you grow and how did the plants do? I hope you're able to do some sort of gardening tasks or gardening chores. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.